Shin Megami Tensei is a franchise that deserves more respect. Even though a lot of people have never heard of it, or only know about it through the Persona series, it has had a lot of really great games that each deserve to be talked about. So today, I'm going to talk about Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, or Shin Megami Tensei Lucifer's Call if you live in Europe. This is a game the featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series joke came from, and is thus the most famous game in the franchise that's not a Persona title. And with that out of the way, let's get to it. Now, if I was going to pick my favorite SMT game to talk about, it would be SMT4. But I'm instead choosing to talk about Nocturne because SMT4 is stuck on the 3DS, where Nocturne was initially released on the PS2 and has had a recent remaster, making it the most accessible. Now, there's much discussion in the community as to whether this remaster is good and or worth it, but I'm not going to be getting into that. In summary, the remaster has shinier graphics overall, and one or two quality of life improvements. If you pick it up, I recommend getting the free Chronicle DLC, and using that to start a new game for the definitive experience. If you want a more in-depth look, you can easily find that elsewhere. So before I start talking about Nocturne proper, I want to give a quick history lesson. All the way back in 1987, a game called Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei came out. It was based on a book of the same name, and it created the monster collector genre in video games. It did well enough to get a sequel, and then its developers said to themselves, why don't we make a spiritual successor? Some kind of new, or Shin Megami Tensei. And so the Shin Megami Tensei franchise started proper in 1992. The Shin Megami Tensei series, or SMT for short, would then go on to exist and generate a lot of spin-offs, with only a small number of games being considered a part of its mainline series. Within the franchise though, Nocturne is probably the most influential game, pioneering a lot of gameplay systems that every game going forward would use in one way or another. The point of all this was to explain that Nocturne is a very important game, and if you like any Persona game past the first two, you should really check this game out. So what's Nocturne's story like? First off, I should clarify that while this is the third mainline game, Nocturne has basically no connection to any other SMT game. There are theories, and SMT technically takes place in a multiverse, but this is to say you need no knowledge of any other games to enjoy this one. So the story properly starts with you, a normal high school boy generally referred to as Demi-Fiend for reasons that will become obvious later. You go to visit your teacher in the hospital, and along the way hear about some cults, meet up with your friends, find the hospital abandoned, and find a creepy man in the basement who summons a demon at you. Your teacher intervenes and takes you to the roof to witness the end of the world, called the Conception. Tokyo folds over into a sphere, where the inside becomes a wasteland with a glowing sun-moon thing in the middle. After a mysterious child gives you demon powers, you find yourself in a post-apocalypse as a half-demon with the goal of restoring the world. See, the Conception is both the end of the world as well as a new beginning, and if a human has a strong enough ideal, or reason, they can recreate the world in their image. The only problem is that humanity has almost completely died out, except for you and a handful of others. Now what remains of the world is filled with demons, and these things called mannequins, which seem like humans, but aren't. And only a human can recreate the world. I should clarify though that when I say the world is filled with demons, I don't mean there isn't society. While demons will act as the enemies you fight throughout the game, they are still for all intents and purposes, people. A bunch of them are just hanging around or forming their own communities. And honestly, that just about sums up the entire plot. Nocturne has a story in the sense that things happen in it, but it's really not that complex, nor the real draw of the game. At least not in a plotline sense. The narrative draw is more so the characters. Throughout the game, you will reunite with your friends, while they each find their own reason to reshape the world. And instead of a binary good versus evil, Nocturne's choices revolve more around ideologies of society and the individual. I'm not going to do a big breakdown of it, but it's nice to see a game be a little more ambitious with its multiple endings. Getting into presentation, starting with the graphics, much of the Megami Tensei franchise uses the art stylings of Kazuma Kaneko, and that includes Nocturne. Kaneko is known for his stylistic designs, and they work wonders here. The characters all look distinct, and the demon designs that existed as artwork for years before this game are brought to life well with 3D models. The environments look good too, from the destroyed remains of the world, to the intact interiors of buildings, to the bizarre architecture of dungeons with demonic influenced structures. Nocturne was probably one of the best looking PS2 games, and the simple designs and strong art direction have allowed it to stay looking good. Sound-wise, Nocturne can be a little mixed. The remaster of the game added voice acting where there was none, and they all suit their characters well. What everyone knows the game for though is the music. The soundtrack here is some kind of mix of rock and metal, with ambient tracks to intense battle tracks with incomprehensible lyrics. Some of these tracks are really good, while others get kind of repetitive. I feel Nocturne has a good soundtrack overall, personally. But now, let's get into the gameplay. There are two things you may know about Nocturne. The first being that it's an RPG, and the second is that it's apparently super hard. I'll get to the difficulty later, as explaining the mechanics will allow me to better explain the difficulty. So Nocturne is a turn-based monster collector RPG. Or to give a better analogy, Nocturne is slightly more complex Pokemon. The gameplay loop is this. There's a story cutscene telling you to go somewhere, you go to that place, some stuff usually happens, and you gradually unlock new areas in the overworld while fighting random battles throughout. You'll find yourself going through dungeons to fight bosses at the end. It's pretty classic RPG stuff as far as the gameplay loop. The main character levels up as you earn experience, and each time you get to invest a stat point and possibly learn a new move. Strength makes you punch harder, magic makes you magic harder, vitality gives more health, agility makes you more accurate and harder to hit, and finally, luck makes you crit more and a bunch of other things. You learn new moves through Magatama, which act as equipment in this game, and give you new moves if you level up past a certain point while wearing one. It's a decent system that allows you to change your strengths and weaknesses whenever you want. While there are many that say a strength build is the only way to play, and it is my personal choice, magic builds are completely viable. But building the main character is only a part of the fun. What makes this game really stand out is the battle system and demons. Demons are the collectible monsters in Shin Megami Tensei, each of which are a real-life mythological figure or creature. You will at some point have a party consisting of the Norse god Thor, an angel from Christianity, and some Shinto god you've never heard of. You generally recruit demons by talking to them in combat and throwing money and items at them while hoping they decide to like you. It's basically random, so don't go thinking too hard about it. Each of these demons has their own base level, stats, initial moves, learnable moves, and weaknesses. Nocturne has physical attacks, 4 base elements, 2 special elements, and almighty attacks that ignore resistances. Now demons act as party members, and alongside your main character, you can have 3 demons out for a 4-man party, holding more in their backline to swap in and out. Demons will gain new moves as you level them up, but here's where it differs from other monster collectors. While other games may have you raise your party members and evolve them into stronger versions of themselves, SMT laughs at that concept. In SMT, your demons will eventually fall off the power curve, and you'll take one along with another demon and slam them together to fuse a new demon. This demon will inherit some of the moves that the demons used to fuse it, and this is how you get stronger party members in Nocturne. To continue with the Pokemon analogy, imagine if you will, you had a Charmander and a Squirtle, a fire and water type Pokemon respectively. Now imagine they stop learning new moves at level 10, and they level up slower and slower as they go on. In Nocturne, you can fuse them together to make the much superior Bulbasaur, whose base level is 12, and get that Bulbasaur to inherit the fire and water moves of Charmander and Squirtle. The fusion system allows you to turn useless party members into something much more powerful, while gradually improving your moveset by selectively picking the best moves through fusion. Or at least, that's how the remaster works. In the original game, the move inheritance was randomly selected, so you had to keep going in and out of menus until it would inherit the moves you wanted. In the remake, you can manually select them, and it really does make the experience a lot better. So now let's explain the battle system. Nocturne is a pioneer within this franchise for inventing what's called the press turn system. As I said earlier, every demon has its own strengths and weaknesses. You'll start your turn with a set amount of moves, a full party giving you 4. If you hit an enemy with their weakness or land a critical hit, you only use up half of that move, allowing you more actions per turn for effective play. Good use of enemy weaknesses can allow you to turn 4 attacks into 8. But you can't just gain moves, you can lose them as well, either by missing or hitting an enemy with something they nullify, reflect, or absorb. Depending on which, you will lose some of your remaining moves or all of them. And the best part is, this system works both ways. Your enemies can also earn and lose turns just like you, making party composition very important. If that sounds complicated, it really isn't. Hit things with stuff they're weak to hit them more, and resist what they attack with to get rid of their turns. Combat is actually really fast overall because of this system. Understanding press turns is one of the two most important things to being good at Nocturne. What's the second? Buffs and debuffs. In Nocturne and SMT in general, buffs and debuffs make or break encounters, and are critical for boss battles. I know boosting your defense and evasion rate in other games usually isn't important, but in Nocturne, it's how you survive, especially when the boss could be constantly boosting their attack. And it's so important that there are two skills in the game for the sole purpose of removing buffs and debuffs, and most bosses have one of them. And now that I've explained press turn and buffs, let's talk about what Nocturne is actually known for. Its difficulty. I'm just gonna say this plainly. On normal difficulty, Nocturne isn't hard. And I don't mean it's not hard for a veteran of the franchise, I mean it's not hard in general. You can get through most encounters by normal attacking. Most dungeons in the game have a certain element or two they like to spam, and you can base your party on resisting it to make your enemies lose all their turns. The AI a lot of the time really isn't intelligent. While some dungeons have an annoying gimmick and the game can sometimes be vague on where you need to go, Nocturne really isn't as hard as its reputation says it is. But why does it have this reputation? There are various reasons for this. The most important one in my opinion is that Nocturne really doesn't have as good of a tutorial as it needs. I just explained press turn and the importance of buffs, but Nocturne doesn't. A lot of people probably try this game without knowing how these systems work, and end up thinking it's impossible because of it. It also doesn't help that the SMT franchise was still working off of a main character death equals game over system at this point, so an unlucky insta-kill move or enemy crit can make you have to reload a save. If Nocturne taught its mechanics properly and didn't punish the player for not keeping 1 out of 4 party members alive, I feel like this game wouldn't be as notorious as it is. But there is one aspect of the game that is kinda deserving of its reputation: the boss battles. Boss battles in Nocturne are very different from normal encounters. While normal battles can be won mostly by auto-attacking, boss battles require your full attention and strategy. You'll need to utilize buffs. You'll need to have your resistances on point to take away their turns instead of giving them more. Some bosses are particularly notorious because they have a gimmick or special move that complicates their battle in a certain way. The Matador boss is infamous for destroying players that haven't been paying attention to buffs or debuffs. I can understand when someone says certain boss battles in Nocturne are unfair, because some of them kind of are. But even so, dying once or twice to a boss does not a hard game make. If you approach the first encounter as a learning opportunity and prepare for the second, you'll win most battles easily. Find their weaknesses and what attacks they use. See if they can get rid of your buffs or debuffs and utilize what they can't deal with. Always keep a healer in your party. I don't want people to not play this game because they think it's too hard for them, when its difficulty is overblown. Sure, the hard difficulty is rightfully hard, but the normal difficulty isn't really much to worry about. And that's about it. The story is unique, the presentation is great, and the gameplay makes this my favorite Monster Collector franchise. Nocturne may be infamous, but it's really worth trying out regardless, and a good starting point for getting into the franchise. So if you want to fight alongside mythological figures, with a great battle system on a mission to punish the laws of the world in the face, go play Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne.